Bram Stoker's Dracula is often considered the quintessential vampire novel and a cultural touchstone, setting the standard for many vampire tropes like aristocratic charms, crumbling castle, and immortality. Dracula is a novel by Bram Stoker. It was published in 1897, tentatively titled as The Undead, a word coined by the author. Dracula has left an indelible mark on popular culture, shaping the landscape of Gothic horror literature. Today, we will discuss in detail the summary, historical context, important symbolism and significant themes of Stoker's Dracula, so get your notepad ready as it's going to be a long video. Dracula is a late Victorian, Gothic, horror romance novel in an epistolatory format. With a melodramatic tone, the novel is in the shifting first-person perspective from the letters, telegrams, newspaper clippings, journal and diary entries of several pivotal characters. Jonathan Harker, Mina Murray and later as Mina Harker, Dr. John Seward, Lucy Westenra and Abraham Van Helsing. Dracula is set at the very end of the 19th century, in Transylvania, Eastern Europe, and around London, England. Before summarizing the plot of Dracula, a historical context is important to know. Dracula can be situated within the context of Victorian England, a period marked by significant cultural and political transformations from 1837 to 1901 during Queen Victoria's reign. This era witnessed substantial economic, political, and social shifts, notably with England expanding its colonial empire across the globe. Thus, the surge of British imperialism brought immense wealth and diverse folklore from various corners of the world. Bram Stoker drew inspiration from the fables of the Carpathian Mountains in modern-day Romania, shaping the narrative around Eastern European history and folklore. Vlad Tepes, a 15th-century Christian nobleman and the Prince of Wallachia, also known as Dracula or the Son of Dracul, served as a key influence for the undead aristocrat in the novel. Vlad gained notoriety for his staunch defense against the Turks and his brutal methods, such as impaling his enemies, and thus was infamously known as Vlad the Impaler. Stoker skillfully blended elements from Vlad's legend to craft the iconic vampire character in his novel, capturing the fears and historical turmoil of the time. Now a summary of the novel, then we will discuss its important themes and key ideas. Dracula begins with the Englishman Jonathan Harker, a young assistant to a solicitor, traveling on a business trip. From Budapest to Transylvania to visit the crumbling castle Dracula and meet Count Dracula, a nobleman who recently acquired an estate in London named Carfax. Harker is concerned about the superstitious locals' fear of Dracula, who give him spiritual charms and crucifixes and warn against the evil that Harker translates as the vampire. Harker is taken to the castle by a strange driver and begins discussing business with the Count. Although initially charmed by Dracula's intelligence and generous hospitality, Harker observes peculiarities in Dracula's behavior such as never eating anything and being active at nighttime only. He realizes that Dracula himself is the mysterious driver and that he is being held captive. Witnessing Dracula's supernatural abilities, such as crawling like a lizard on the castle walls and transforming into a bat, adds to Harker's unease. In a castle room, Harker encounters three beautiful but demonic women eager to drink his blood. Dracula intercedes, asserting Harker as his own and returns him to his room. Harker later discovers Dracula's resting place in a basement chapel, sleeping in a wooden coffin filled with soil. In a daring move, Harker tries to eliminate Dracula by striking him in the face with a shovel, but the vampire appears only very lightly injured. Seizing an opportunity, Harker escapes through his window and takes his journal to share this ordeal with his fiancée, Mina. Meanwhile, upper-middle-class friends Mina Murray and Lucy Westenra are vacationing in Whitby, an English seaside town. A Russian ship crashes and a huge dog jumps out and runs away. Everyone on the ship is gone, except the captain who is dead. The ship was carrying 50 boxes of dirt from Dracula's castle. Surprisingly, even though the ship crashed, the boxes were still delivered as planned. Lucy's mysterious illness, marked by sleepwalking and a steady decline in health, prompts Mina to seek help from a nobleman named Arthur Holmwood. Lucy's 29-year-old fiancé in Chief London's immense lunatic asylum, Dr. John Seward, Lucy's friend and former suitor Morris, and eventually Professor Van Helsing, Dr. Seward's former professor from Amsterdam. Van Helsing suspects the cause of Lucy's ailment but keeps it from the group while trying to save Lucy through hanging garlic charms and blood transfusions. Despite efforts to save Lucy through blood transfusions by the groups, her blood levels drop at night. One night when the men are away, a wolf attacks, jumping through the window, shocking Lucy's mother to death, and Lucy notes the incident in her journal before succumbing to death, leaving the group devastated by her death. While Mina has been tending to Harker in Budapest, who suffered a nervous breakdown from his encounter with Count Dracula, dismissing the bizarre events at Castle Dracula as hallucination. Mina and Harker get married, and upon returning to England, they inherit Peter Hawkins' fortune, who had died and was Jonathan's boss. Van Helsing reveals to Harker that the encounters were real. The group learns that Lucy is an undead vampire and witnesses her menacing activities of haunting the cemetery grounds and trying to suck children's blood. The group ultimately truly kill her by driving a stake through her heart, decapitating her and stuffing her mouth with garlic. Believing that Dracula had bitten Lucy while she was in England, the group then determines to track him to eliminate him. As the group readies themselves for the confrontation with Dracula, Harker notices a troubling change in Mina's health. One night, while the entire group gathers in Dr. Seward's office at the insane asylum, a loud crash startles them. They witness Dracula biting Mina and compelling her to drink his blood, all while Harker is unconscious nearby. The alarming scene raises concerns within the group, and Mina believes she has been poisoned through this blood ritual. Seward has been conversing with a mental patient named Renfield, who expresses a desire to absorb the life force of animals he consumes. To the group's dismay, Renfield is revealed to be in contact with Dracula, having allowed the vampire into the asylum, leading to the attack on Mina and the formation of a dangerous blood link between them that Van Helsing called the vampire's baptism of blood. The group discovers Dracula's shipment of 50 wooden boxes to England from Transylvania filled with sacred earth, so the group sterilizes 49 boxes with sacred wafer to weaken the vampire. The group, accompanied by Mina, embarks on a journey to confront Dracula. Relying on Mina's ability to reveal the vampire's whereabouts under Van Helsing's hypnotic influence due to their direct link. Anticipating Dracula's arrival in Port Varna, near Romania, the group discovers he has landed in Galitz. Mina and Van Helsing kill the 3 female vampires and seal the castle with the aid of sacred wafers. Stopping him en route to the Castle Dracula, they seize the opportunity while he rests in his coffin. Harker and Morris deliver fatal blows by stabbing him in the heart and beheading him, finally ending Dracula's existence and releasing his soul from his undead body. Unfortunately, Morris succumbs to injuries inflicted by a gypsy during the confrontation. In a final note written 7 years later, Harker mentions that he and Mina now have a son named Quincy after Quincy Morris. Seward and Arthur, too, find love and marry. Despite their meticulous compilation of accounts detailing Dracula's activities, they express concern that their incredible tale may not be believed that proves Dracula's existence. Other than fangs and stakes, the first imagery associated with the mention of Dracula is blood. Before analyzing the novel for themes, it's important to first understand the symbolism of blood throughout the novel. The Count Dracula associates blood with ancestry, portraying blood as too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace. And the glories of the great races are as a tale that is told, suggesting that blood not is a physical item needed for sustenance but also a symbolic representation to the great races and glorious noble families of the past. Predicting a lineage war between East and West, ancient and modernity, righteous and wicked. In Dracula, sustenance for the titular character is derived from the life essence within the blood of the living. This essential life power permits Dracula to endure over extended periods. Renfield, an inmate in Seward's asylum, craves the consumption of living animals and their blood to acquire their life force, as he explains to Mina. I tried to kill him for the purpose of strengthening my vital powers by the assimilation with my own body of his life through the medium of his blood, relying, of course, upon the scriptural phrase, for the blood is the life. Dracula's rejuvenation in England, paralleled with Lucy's decline, hints at the potential assimilation of vital powers through blood consumption, echoing Renfield's perspective. Lucy's life force is drained extensively by Dracula, necessitating blood transfusions from Arthur, Seward, Van Helsing, and Morris. The act of drawing blood carries a sadistic undercurrent, mirroring Dracula's parasitic nature. Blood, in addition to its literal importance, carries connotations of sexual desire and violence, connecting to Victorian notions of arousal. Instances of blood feeding also evoke the suggestion of sexual intercourse, with Lucy nearly fainting after Dracula's penetration by sucking her blood. Dracula's nocturnal blood-taking of Lucy and Mina becomes a masked expression of his desire to dominate and violate women, akin to sexual assault, which is hinted at through Mina's wailing, "Unclean! Unclean! Even the Almighty shuns my polluted flesh. I must bear this mark of shame upon my forehead until the judgment day." Mina feels as if a horrid poison is coursing through her veins after Dracula takes her blood and forms a blood link with her. The vampiric blood drinking parallels Christian communion but in a distorted sense, as Dracula seeks physical longevity devoid of spiritual essence. Now let's analyze the important themes in Dracula in detail. Perhaps the first and foremost theme that jumps out from the narrative is the idea of Christian salvation in contrast with superstitious beliefs. The intersections between Christian beliefs, superstitious practices, and rational science are explored in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mina and Jonathan Harker are practicing Protestants who marry hastily. Arthur doesn't like the discretion of Lucy's body. And almost every group discussion ends on the note that they will succeed in God's name or by God's will. While many characters express devout Christian beliefs, superstition and occult practices become intertwined with their religious convictions. Transylvanian peasants employ charms against the evil eye, and the group's strategies against vampires, by using garlic charms and wooden stakes that were rooted in medieval superstitions, prove effective in ultimately killing Dracula. This strain between rational scientific thought and irrational belief mirrors Victorian society. Van Helsing embody a marriage of religious attitudes with a procedural, scientific mindset. Van Helsing, as a man of learning, integrates Christian faith, superstitions, and scientific knowledge. Representing a remedy for a societal problem identified by Stoker, the notion that scientific knowledge alone might not overcome the dangers of superstition. The novel emphasizes the potency of Christian symbols, portraying them as effective weapons against supernatural evil, notably in the form of crucifixes, communion, and holy wafers. Dracula, symbolizing a satanic figure, alters and distorts Christian rituals through his bloodthirstiness, which extends physical life while severing any spiritual existence. Despite the predatory actions, Stoker presents a liberal vision of salvation, suggesting that all the dead, except the undead, attain incomparable peace and salvation in death, reinforcing the novel's Christian undertones. During the Victorian era, women faced a binary perception. They were either deemed virtuous as virgins embodying purity and innocence or confined to the roles of caregivers, wives, and mothers. Any deviation from these roles rendered a woman a societal outcast, boiling down to the Madonna whore complex. As Dracula arrives in England, it becomes evident that the impending battle of good versus evil centers on female sexuality. Both Lucy and Mina are not portrayed as fully realized individuals but rather as formulaic representations of virtues traditionally ascribed to women, chaste, pure, and dutiful to their men. The Madonna whore complex is represented through Mina and Lucy's potential maternal behavior. For example, while comforting a sobbing Arthur, a saintly Mina declares we women have something of the mother in us that makes us rise above smaller matters when the mother spirit is invoked. On the other hand, the unholy description of the diabolical vampire Lucy in a similar situation is, with a careless motion, she flung to the ground, callous as a devil, the child that up to now she had clutched strenuously to her breast, growling over it as a dog growls over a bone, suggesting the frightening vile aspect of womanhood. Bram Stoker wrestles with sexual morality, infusing sexual subtext with a Victorian and Christian moral framework. The novel implicates sexuality with sin in a moralizing manner, linking Dracula's blood-sucking to violent seduction and sexual assault. The three vampire sisters in Castle Dracula epitomizes the Victorian male imagination's dream and nightmare, embodying both the promise and curse of sexual fulfillment. The sexually assertive women, perceived as a threat to male dominance, must be eradicated. Lucy's transformation into a vile vampire leads to her destruction, seen as a necessary act to restore her to a socially acceptable and virtuous state. Arthur's interpretation of the blood transfusion as a sexual consummation highlights the novel's unmistakably sexual subtext. He drives a stake into Lucy's heart to eradicate the vampiric presence within her and restore the purity and innocence he cherishes. Stoker employs unmistakably sexual language to describe this act, with the stake symbolically representing the male organ, suggesting an ultimate consummation of love. The blow is administered by Lucy's fiancé, Arthur, signifying her punishment not just for succumbing to vampiric seduction but also for being available to such advances. As Dracula preys on willing victims. Arthur's act transforms Lucy back into a lawful, monogamous lover, reinstating her Victorian virtue of purity. Dracula's seduction of Lucy and Mina further accentuates the theme of malevolent sexuality. Mina's victimization is perceived as a form of violation, and she can only regain marital intimacy after Dracula's demise. She feels as if she has become unclean, feeling the shame of her polluted flesh. The men vigilantly monitor Mina, fearing the loss of another Victorian ideal of female piety to the darker side. This intense scrutiny stems from the men's apprehension of association with socially scorned individuals, reflecting their profound concerns for personal safety. Dracula's taunt to Van Helsing, in Chapter 28, about possessing the beloved women encapsulates a male fantasy, echoing the timeless fear that women's uncontrollable desires may lead men to a detrimental fall from grace, echoing the departure of Adam and Eve from Eden. Dracula, set in 1897, features a range of advanced technologies for that time, such as Seward's phonograph, blood transfusions, telegrams, trains, Mina's typewriter, and shorthand. The shift to England highlights the imprint of modernity, with Dr. Seward recording on a phonograph and Mina using a typewriter. The narrative portrays England as embracing progress, with Mr. Swale's rejection of superstitious ghosts at the Whitby Cemetery, contrasting with Transylvania's adherence to superstitions, evil eye beliefs and shrines. Dracula's threat to London hinges on modernity, as scientific advancements lead the English to dismiss supernatural beliefs. The novel also contrasts present modernity with history, portraying Dracula as a centuries-old figure residing in a medieval castle. Thus, the narrative suggests a tension between modernity and historical influences on the present, exemplified by Dracula's potential invasion of Britain. Harker's observation that unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had, and have, powers of their own which mere modernity cannot kill emphasizes a dominant concern of the Victorian era, a period marked by challenges to long-standing beliefs due to scientific and industrial revolutions. The novel explores the clash between modern and ancient knowledge, highlighting the necessity of embracing diverse perspectives to confront the ever-repeating cycle of history. Van Helsing knits this gap, embodying knowledge from both East and West. This creates a dichotomy between the science and technology aiding Van Helsing's crew and the traditions governing Dracula's world. Although technology aids the protagonists, it has limitations, illustrated by the failure of blood transfusions and telegraph disruptions. The characters must confront the existence of vampires, re-educate themselves in ancient traditions, overcome their reliance on cutting-edge technology like the Winchester rifles, and resort to primitive methods, like knives and stakes and garlic charms, to defeat Dracula. Van Helsing's call for comprehensive knowledge, as he warns Seward that to rid the earth of this terrible monster we must have all the knowledge and all the help which we can get, highlights the dangers of exclusively adhering to singular modern thought, emphasizing the vulnerability of a world that dismisses the lessons of history and diverse cultural perspectives. While Dracula undeniably exudes menace and poses a substantial threat, his origin holds particular significance in rendering him alarming to the other characters. Hailing from Eastern Europe, Dracula stands out as markedly distinct from his Western adversaries. He explicitly emphasizes this dissimilarity to Harker, stating, "Our ways are not your ways and there shall be to you many strange things." Dracula, representing the archaic and supernatural, threatens the progress and rationality of the English characters. The fear of regression to primitive beliefs is palpable as the characters grapple with the unfamiliar. The novel perpetuates cultural stereotypes about Eastern Europe, associating it with superstitions, ancient rituals, and a backward way of life. The peasants of Transylvania, with their roadside shrines and traditional practices, are portrayed as primitive. As Harker observes Dracula resting on his final night at the castle, his horror is not solely about Dracula's existence but rather the apprehension of transferring this being to London. The fear extends beyond Dracula himself to the potential contamination of national identity and intrusion into the national boundaries. This fear of Dracula as a form of foreign invasion becomes evident in the character's determination to repel him to Transylvania for their ultimate confrontation. Also, the fear associated with the other is amplified through the symbolism of blood. Dracula's need to consume the blood of the English characters reflects the anxiety about the contamination of their life force by the foreign and unknown. Dracula embodies the peril of introducing a foreign influence, threatening to taint local bloodlines, reflecting a profound anxiety about outsiders wielding power for nefarious purposes. Dracula's foreignness becomes a source of terror, serving as an allegory for the unraveling of British imperialism. His immigration to Britain symbolizes an invasive force, resonating with the contemporary apprehension that years of colonial oppression might provoke retaliation. Therefore, the novel reflects the colonial anxieties of the Victorian era, where the dominant Western powers were apprehensive about the potential threat from the colonies. Dracula's invasion of England can be interpreted as a manifestation of these anxieties, with the East posing a threat to the stability and purity of the West. Stoker highlights Dracula's foreignness through imperfect English, accented speech, and reliance on Jonathan for navigating British customs and legal procedures for financial transactions, intensifying the portrayal of the vampire as an unsettling outsider. This was for today. Hope you liked today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.